something. Also, where are you in the world? I don't think I actually know where you live.
San Jose, so like an hour south of San Francisco.
St. Josie.
Yeah. Which is like, you know, people in San Francisco consider San Jose like the Newark, New Jersey of the Bay Area. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
Which, totally fine with us. And like, I will defend San Jose like to the death. I think it's the best, but you know.
As you should.
It's like if you asked a person in like Berkeley about like San Jose, they're definitely like, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry." You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here. I don't actually think you and I have ever actually sat down and had like a real ass conversation either, even though like we've been in each other's orbit for a bazillion years. And so this feels very nice to me.
Yeah, I feel the same. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So, we're in a series that I'm calling What the Fuck America to just kind of like process some of my own feelings about what's going on, as well as hopefully give some language and clarity for folks who are also asking the same question. But before we get into that, and your new book, which is forthcoming, which I'm very excited about, how do you, Brad Onishi, introduce yourself to people right now?
Well, you know, co-host of Straight White American Jesus, which is on Irreverent, just like this show and other great shows. I teach at the University of San Francisco, so I teach part-time there, philosophy and religious studies. And yeah, new book coming out, so I like to write things, and those are kind of what I do: podcast, teach, and write.
That's so sick. Like, it's also very fun to see all of like my friends who are like in like the same sphere. I was telling somebody else this the other day. I'm just like, when one of us wins, I feel like we're all really, I don't know. It feels so like, I don't know. The world feels a little bit less competitive since I've hit my 30s.
I feel like this is a tangent, but like I turned 40 a bit ago, and I feel like 30s, like 40s is good. And don't get me wrong, I'm happy. I'm like super stoked about so many things, but those 30s, man, those, you know, it's not the 20s, it's the 30s that are they're just like super fun. And life kind of starts to make sense. You get in a little groove, and it's good.
Yeah. Yes, I'm going to affirm that. It is, it is true. 30s, I mean, I'll never go back to my 20s. That was a shit show.
Right.
So it's one of those things where it's like, just by mere comparison, I'm thrilled to be where I am, because it's like, okay, so now I understand hopefully how to make some money, or at least how to not accumulate more debt.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even that I'm really making a whole lot of money now. It's just I'm finally making enough to where like I'm not like overdrafting. And that's a cool feeling. You know what I'm saying?
Hashtag 30s right there.
Hey, it's having enough money to pay your rent and go get beer with your friends.
Who knew?
That's truly. Who knew? Let me close this window real quick, because my neighbor is doing yard work. Okay. All right. Are you Dr. Brad or are you Professor Brad?
Just whatever. Neither. I mean, you know, whatever. Brad is fine. I think that's better.
Are you a doctor, though? Do you have a PhD?
Yes, I do.
So you are Dr. Brad Onishi.
Not that kind of doctor. You know,
I know that. So. Bigger religious studies.
Yeah.
So you host this podcast called Straight White American Jesus on Irreverent Media. Everyone go subscribe right now. Also, like, it's delicious. Like, you really kind of cover what's going on in this kind of like a very interesting niche, but it's also like not so niche anymore. Like, it's almost becoming like existential threat. So, A, tell me about Straight White American Jesus. 2, what have you been covering recently that has made you just go, oh no, or
So Straight White American Jesus started 2018. You know, like all of us, we were all trying to cope with what seemed like the Trump administration's attempts to take down our country and democracy and so on. And so talked to a friend and said, look, you know, we are both ex-evangelicals and we're both now professors of religion. And so maybe we can do something that's like an insider scholar point of view, right? Like there's a bunch of shows that are insider shows that are like helping people deconstruct and process, and that is amazing and essential and so helpful and so on. There's a lot of shows too, or there's a lot of people at least who are like journalists or like, profs who cover this stuff, but they've never lived it. Like they see it from the outside. They do the interviews. They watch the clips. They read the
they
books,
see it as a phenomenon, not a lived experience.
Totally. Like never been inside. And so we just thought, hey, can we do something that's both? And, look, if people listen, great. If not, maybe it'll be cathartic and we can like work through some of our stuff. And so unfortunately, as you mentioned, it's over the last 3-4 years, it's become more and more relevant to talk about things like Christian nationalism and all the ways that evangelicals and Catholics and so many other religious groups are sort of attempting political domination in the country, and the ways that it's unfair and marginalizing and oppressive to so many other people in the country. And so that's what we do. It's the kind of show I think that sometimes folks start listening to, and then like after a month they're like, I need a break because this is depressing. It's really depressing. I'll see you guys in a month. You know what I mean?
It's heavy shit, but someone's got to talk about it.
It's like when people are like, hey, I listened for a while and then I need a break. I'm like never offended. I'm like, yeah, just seriously, go take care of yourself. And so in terms of stuff we've been talking about lately that I think is just ultra. I mean, we've just done a ton on the overturning of Roe, which of course I think is just can never talk about enough and can never dissect enough. I also think that there's some things that are a little bit in the weeds for some folks if they're not the kind of listener reader who wants to delve into the absolute details of politics. But I really do think if you look closely at the primaries, if you look closely at some of the other moves that are being made, there's an attempt to make sure that in the next presidential election, if things go back to, say, a vice president to certify an election or to state legislatures, that there's a plan in place to make sure that there's no way that the Republican loses, whether that is through alternative slates of electors, state legislatures that can basically choose their candidate despite how people vote, and so on. So I know it sounds kind of boring and it sounds kind of like wonky, but it really is like a slow-moving coup that sometimes we don't see because we're paying attention to Mar-a-Lago getting raided or January 6th stuff or whatever. So,
and that's what I'm also like highly afraid of myself. And also, like, I was thinking, like, I'm getting my passport renewed right now because it expired over 2020. Because there's a big part of me that is scared about, like, what it's going to be like to be a queer person living in this country. And I get that. I look like a dude. I look like a white person. So, like, there's a lot of super big privilege that comes with that, et cetera, et cetera. And also, I don't pass as straight. Like, I do not pass as a straight man. Like, my voice, like, I could, maybe, but what kind of fucking life is that? And there's a part of me that's like, okay, so, like, do I need to make plans to, like, get out, to go somewhere else? Like, Canada's looking, I mean, I know Canada's got their problems, but they looking real friendly, you know?
Do you feel like that's so I've had this conversation so many times over the last couple months, right, with friends and colleagues and people that are like, yeah, I went to Amsterdam this summer, and they kind of look at me like, like, or I went to like Toronto and it was, or just got back from New Zealand and checked it, and I guess I'm wondering if you feel like there's like there's always been an impulse, right, for folks to try to get out of here because of violence, right, against queer people, against people of color, against Black and Indigenous folks, and yet I wonder if it's reached a level or like a set of rungs on the concentric circle where more people are considering it than maybe in the past. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I think maybe like when I I was a freshman in college when Obama got elected. And so, like, I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And things, 2016 rolled around, and I was just so confused. And then Joe Biden got elected, and I was like, okay, something's going to get back to normal. Maybe, hopefully, something's going to... And then it just has felt like 5 years of crisis, or 6 years of crisis, really. And, like, that's truly, like, how it has been. And it's like, I don't know. Yeah, I think it's to the point where, like, the signs are all there, I think. Like, all signs point to this is a big possibility. Like, it's no longer outside of the realm of... It's no longer madness to say. It's no longer foolish to say, hey, this could happen. Only because it's happened before. Like, that's the thing that people forget. Like, Germany was a Christian nation when they went into World War II. When they started rounding up Jewish folks and Roma people and queer folk. So
totally, yeah. I think the way you put it there really hit me. Is it's been 6 years of crisis, and so everyone. It feels as if, right, we've lived in a timeline where your nervous system just has to be on alert at all times, right? That there's no sense of, like, just resting and feeling as if you're safe. There's always a crisis to be wary of. If you throw in environmental crises and, other things, other disruptions related to, like, food chain or supply chain and war in Ukraine and invasion of Ukraine. Like, there's just so many layers, I feel like, to the crisis on top of the kind of like white Christian nationalism and the just MAGA nation violence. So it's hard. And anyway, when you said the Canada's looking real good, it's like, it's amazing how many. I don't know if. Don't get me wrong, and I don't want anyone listening to feel like I'm naive here. Like, there's been so many times I know folks in this country have thought, man, I wish I could get out, or I wish I could go to a different part of the country, like, for sure. But the amount of people in this country who are now thinking, maybe I can move to Belgium, Australia,
Mexico City, baby. It's rated #1 for queer folks.
Right? Mexico City's just got, like, Americans everywhere at the moment, right? If you read about it, right? There's just, like, Americans all over the place in Mexico City right now. Just not something I think, like, my parents' generation would have ever imagined, right? Would they have ever imagined people like us in 30s, 40s who are just having conversations every day with friends and others that are like, yeah, I might, Quebec. Yeah, winters are tough, but looking good, right? Mexico City, why not? Let's do it. Anyway, it's a harrowing time for sure. And all that to say, also, if make sure you register. While we're talking about it, make sure you register to vote for your midterm elections, especially in Georgia. I'm working with the Stacey Abrams campaign, so I'm like, if we can get her elected, I might be able to stay longer. If you want to keep me in America. Sure. You got to help me get registered to vote. Is that a Stacey Abrams commercial? Just Kevin,
absolutely.
Like, hey, if you want me to stay, vote for Stacey.
Do you want me to stay in Georgia? Like, that's like I am literally a commodity here. I'm a big money maker.
That's what I want. I want to sign on to YouTube and, like, try to watch a video, but have to watch an ad from the Stacey Abrams campaign.
It's just me,
Kevin,
staring straight into the camera as it, like, zooms in slowly. Do
you want me to stay or not? Okay, vote for Stacey.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Depending on who you are, that might actually hurt the campaign. But I think, I think more people like me than dislike me right now. So I think.
Oh no, that's a big boost to the campaign.
I received that. Thank you so much. Shifting gears ever so slightly, talk about your book, Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next. I'm very, very excited about this delicious book and why it's going to be out in January 2023, so just after the New Year's. But I feel like it's like, I'm wondering if they could push up the timeline. Could we get it out like October, like right before or something? Because it feels like feels pretty relevant to me. But tell me real quick, what's the pitch for the book? What are people getting into when they pull up your book?
Yeah, a couple things. So one is, again, just that kind of insider scholarly point of view. So there's just a lot of memoir in
Real
here.
quick,
There's
can you
a lot
define
of
what you mean by insider when you say that?
Yeah, thank you. Basically, just there's a lot of me sharing what it was like for me to live through converting at a white megachurch at 14, mixed race person. And then the kind of like, what is, I think there's a lot of people who have gone through a kind of analogous experience of living through white evangelicalism, living through white conservative Christianity in some way in this country, and everything that goes with that. And I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is when you're living through that, yes, you realize that when you deconstruct and you kind of leave that movement, you realize the toxicity of the theology, right? The theology is heteronormative, right? It is queerphobic. It is often cloaked in, just toxic understandings of gender roles and marriage and love and politics and so many things. But I think what's more subtle is you don't realize that what has also been like if the body of the white evangelical is the canvas, which you don't realize has been also kind of thrown onto that canvas, are so many stories of what it means to be a real American. So many stories of what it means to live in a country like chosen by God for a special role in world history. So many stories and so many myths of what it means to be a citizen and someone who engages in the greatest country on earth, and the kingdom of God and the city on a hill all go together in this thing we call the United States of America. And so I really want to show that there's not only just like myths we don't see, but those myths are actually more insidious than we might even imagine, right? That they're filled with very at times explicit and very at times subtle ideas surrounding segregation, surrounding race, surrounding immigration and xenophobia, right? All of that gets globbed onto this kind of Christian story as it takes place in the United States. And so sometimes it's hard to notice. So why do I go into like some of my story in the book? Because it took me so long to kind of realize that as I deconstructed biblical inerrancy and other, things like that, I was also deconstructing nationalism, xenophobia, white supremacy, queerphobia, and so on and so forth. And so that's a big part of the book. The other part of the book is just the history of white Christian nationalism from the kind of 1960s till now. And one of the big arguments is that from the 60s forward, we've had a kind of counter-revolution, that if the 60s are a time when there is a civil rights movement and various queer liberation movements, various women's rights movements, various advances in immigration policy, it's also a time when most white Christians in the country look around and are like, we need to get our country back. And they've been preparing for war since then, and we're seeing the fruits of that come to bear now.
Yeah. Because, that's the thing is, I think for those of us who are from that world, who grew up in it, because I remember going to a fucking March for Life as a kid, and that was just part of the deal. And I remember oftentimes talking about voting in church, because that was part of the deal. I often remember, honoring the troops and, just the whole we're gonna have we had the American flag right next to the Christian flag, and my grandfather was military, my father was military, and thankfully none of my brothers joined. I almost joined the Air Force because except for I was trying to do the gay way of joining the Air Force, and by that I mean I was auditioning for the Air Force jazz band. And I was trying to be the lead fucking vocalist on the keys in there, but they wanted a sexy little someone with boobs and no hair on their face. Yeah. And so I didn't.
Okay. I see.
Didn't quite fit the bill. Yeah. They said it was good though. So yeah. That's. But all that. Yeah.
Some good notes.
But the thing is just I grew up in it thinking that to be Christian was. I mean, they don't tell you this, but to be Christian is to be American. And that's through all of our schooling. And if you're any kind of different, it's huh?
Yep.
Like people just like they gawk at you,
Yeah.
and so you get in line or you get, socially ostracized. It's very subtle.
One of the things I talk about, like you mentioned, the troops in it. So I converted at a church in Southern California. A lot of folks think Southern California is this liberal,
not a fucking bit,
place,
dude.
and it's, not. And our friend Sarah Heath can tell some stories about that.
I still wonder why she
and
lived
others,
down
but
there.
behind the curtain.
Behind
but
enemy lines.
so I converted this church, and it's a Quaker church, right? So it's, Society of Friends. And so you're like, oh, I know about Quakers. They're into peace. They're into social justice. They're into egalitarianism, right? And we didn't do any of that. They got rid of all that, and then they just brought in the, like, very generic, like, Rick Warren kind of evangelicalism, like Southern California evangelicalism.
So when you converted, they were Quaker, and then they changed?
No, it's really weird if you go to my hometown. It's the hometown of Richard Nixon. And Quakers have been there for like 100 years. And in the 60s, in the time I'm talking about, they really switched from like, hey, all that cool Quaker stuff, like silence and listening and discernment and social justice and abolition movements.
They wanted to catch the Holy Ghost.
Hey, all that? Yeah, let's throw that out, and then let's bring in Rick Warren with the Hawaiian shirts and the purpose-driven life and the whole James Dobson
I remember
thing.
that.
And so by the time I get there, that's what it is. So here's my point: is like I'm in ministry 7 years there. When I get older, we have a prayer meeting every Tuesday, 6 a.m. And at that prayer meeting, I tried to go every Tuesday. Sometimes I didn't make it, slept in, but we prayed for the troops. Like people would write in, please pray for the troops. And we prayed for the troops like, 15 times, right? Every Tuesday. So we go around the circle and somebody hit send in, please pray for the troops. Please. Okay, we will. All right. Please pray for our boys. All right. It's a Quaker church. We, in 7 years, did not pray for peace one time.
Woo!
Right?
Come
Not
on,
one time.
somebody. That'll tell you.
And to me, that's right. That's everything you just talked about in terms of troops and nationalism and being American is being Christian and being Christian is being American. How are you going to sit in a Quaker church for 7 years at the prayer meeting and you didn't one time come across a prayer request? It's like, we pray for peace on God's earth and the stopping of violence everywhere. Nothing, not one time did I see that prayer request.
Coming to think of it, I've never heard that prayer request either. Like the first time I actually heard somebody say we're going to send our love and intention for peace to all creatures who are suffering was in my yoga class.
There you go.
It wasn't until I
go.
studied Buddhist meditation that I started realizing, oh, this is the kind of prayer that I've been longing for my entire life. And I never found it in this other place because all we're doing is praying for the empire to continue to be the empire. And guess what? It doesn't need your prayers. It runs on your blood and your money that it's taking from you and your labor.
Yep. And oil. Yeah.
Wow. We're really, these are just sunny times. So, continuing with the book a little bit, you don't have to give anything away unless you want to. I think I'll still read it. But when you think about and what's next, what is that? Because that seems to me like a kind of terrifying. I just also finished reading Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler, and so my imagination is in a very dark place right now. Also, everyone go read that. It's so good.
It is good. It's amazing. So I have a chapter at the end of the book that is about what's called the American redoubt. And you're like, what is that? So redoubt means like refuge or safe kind of terrain. And one of the things I think that folks are always wondering is what is the future, right? Is it and what's going to happen in states like Texas where these extremist, inhumane abortion laws are being passed? What's going to happen in places like Georgia, right? If this election goes differently than one hopes, and so on and so forth. And I think there's so many headlines going towards the South and the Midwest for very good reason, right? Like MAGA Nation taking those places by storm. There's violence. against so many people who that group does not consider real Americans, people that they don't want to see in public and who they are trying to basically scare away. What does not get much headline is that the MAGA migration has in some ways already started. And that if you look at this movement called the American Redoubt, it is centered in Idaho, but it includes Montana, Wyoming, and then parts of like eastern Oregon and eastern Washington on the other side of the Cascade Mountains from Seattle and Portland. The American Redoubt is a movement that is a Christian separatist movement that wants to build a theocracy in those states. And it wants to basically have a Christian dominionist form of government and culture and society and economy. And you might say, all right, we've heard this before. There are Christian separatists. We get it. They're living in Appalachia, or they're living in the Ozarks, or they're somewhere.
Not here.
And we've heard this, right? What if you dig into the American Redoubt? Here's a couple things that you realize. One, they're making immense inroads into. So if you just take Idaho, the state legislature, all of if you look at various counties, especially in northern Idaho surrounding Coeur d'Alene, they have basically been able to make deep inroads and take control of government in those places, such that this theocratic vision for the United States is taking shape. And you say, all right, that's great, Brad. It's Idaho. I mean, there are more people in the city of Atlanta than there are in Idaho and Wyoming combined. Why are we talking about this? Well, the reason is Boise is the fastest growing city west of the Mississippi. And who is moving to Boise? Who are the people moving to Boise or Coeur d'Alene or Eagle or other places in Idaho? They are Californians. They are Washingtonians. They are people who are leaving what they consider blue and quote-unquote oppressive liberal states to join this Christian separatist movement. And so something like 80,000 Californians left for Idaho in the last year.
80,000?
And so part of the book, it finishes with this because, as I just mentioned, I grew up in Southern California. If I just showed up in Boise today, if I just got on a plane and showed up in Boise and I sent out as many invitations as I could via social media, hey, high school reunion, church reunion, let's do it. And a lot of those people don't talk to me anymore, but let's say they did. If I found everybody in Idaho right now, probably 100 people that I grew up with, right, that I went to church with or school with, who have left, right, what people considered when I grew up, they were like, we live in Southern California, we have it made, we live in paradise, Disneyland, beach, sun, who would ever leave here? We're the best. Nobody ever thought of Idaho as oh yeah, that's my dream. My dream is to move to Montana. Oh, I can't wait. When I grow up, that's what I'm doing. The amount of people I graduated high school with who are now yep, finally got out of communist California and I'm raising my kids in a God-fearing place like Idaho. Like I said, triple digits amount of people. Now, last part here is well, all right, all those Californians and Washingtonians, they must be making Idaho more liberal because they're from California and Seattle. I mean, come on, right? If you look at the social science, they are making Idaho and these states more conservative. They have shifted government right because they view these regions like Idaho, Wyoming, Montana as an open, unzoned lot for them to build their theocratic Christian separatist movement. So they go there with the intention of creating a thing that they think represents the ideal of the United States of America. And it is already happening. You have, and I can go into more detail. There's a whole chapter in the book. But when people ask what's next, I'm like, the MAGA migration is already happening. And I know you all don't pay attention, to headlines from Montana or Idaho very often. But that, to me, is the canary in the coal mine. If you want to see the dream, there's the dream, and it's already taking shape in those states.
That canary died. Canary Dunn tweeted her last tweet. She just skin and feather. She just bones and feathers at this point, and everyone's just like, "Oh, it's a cute little canary." Oh my God.
Yeah,
I think something you pointed out earlier, this is something that people aren't paying attention to because what we're paying attention to is something like the January 6th hearing, or the charges finally brought against Breonna Taylor's murderers, or any number of things that we also need to be paying attention to, for sure. This is what's shitty about living in a 6-year crisis, where it's just, you got to pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
This is, I guess, like relevant news, and I'm going to release this episode probably next week, so it'll still be relevant. Mar-a-Lago getting raided by FBI agents, which everyone's pointed out is like they don't just do that; they have to have like pretty surefire, clear, like, yes, we know that this is there before they go in. Otherwise, it'll be a big blunder, and they don't want to do that. And I just want to point out, this is the person Trump appointed, which I think is
totally.
But what makes me so sad, not sad, but just blows my mind, is that regardless of evidence, regardless of what actually happened, reality in the minds of so many of these individuals is a non-issue. Like, there's like no way for us to actually get on the same page ever, because we're constantly like negotiating what actual, like, reality. And when you don't have a shared reality, like, it's hard to get anybody to talk, or like at least get to talk about it in any way that's productive.
Yeah. I think there's two. Well, let's just talk about what happened after the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. The right wing machine went into full, vengeful resentment grievance mode, as you would imagine. People like Steven Crowder said this is tomorrow's war. Jack Posobiec, was saying, now is the time that our forefathers warned us about. There's Proud Boy saying, I'm standing back and standing by. I'm ready. So the idea is that you search Mar-a-Lago with an FBI warrant. That is a declaration of war. That's essentially what has been, and that's clear to me. What you just said, I think, is huge, right? It's like we have no shared reality. There's no ability to say, well, is there any evidence? Is there any reason? Is there a chance that the FBI had a reasonable set of conditions to do this? And I think it's not only like the idea that we can't get on the same page because we don't share a reality in terms of like facts and evidence, and it's kind of an epistemology, right? We don't have an epistemic shared reality.
Epistemology meaning how you know what you know.
Totally, right? And so, we seem to be on different planes when it comes to that, right? I feel like I know things based on a certain method, right? If something happens, I want to like see if there's evidence. I want to see if there's data. I want to see if there are people who are experts in the field who are corroborating this and can provide insight. Others are not doing that kind of method. They're operating on a very different one. I think there's also the problem of reducing the human condition to war and to conflict, and basically saying it's us against them, me against you,
right?
And it's a zero-sum game. It's about winning and vanquishing. It's not about making space. It's about there being limited space, and who's going to get it, me or you? And to me, the Trump era is not something qualitatively new when it comes to white Christian nationalism, but it has laid bare that zero-sum game for so many. Oh, you raided the former president's house? That must be because you want war and you're trying to vanquish me. Well, guess what? I'm going to do this to vanquish you. There's no way to like make space or make room for discussion, dialogue, debate about what's right or good or best. There's no assumption that like the more folks that we include in our body politic, the heart gets bigger. And like art, right? Like there's a way that you understand love and the human condition as the more we add, the more I expand and you expand, and things get bigger and more just wondrous and full of complexity and full of just so many layers of what it means to be human. There's another assumption that's like, it's either me or you. We got a scarce resource here. So either I win and you lose, or you get me and I lose. We'll see what happens, buddy, right? And I think that's another way that we see ourselves operating just on different planes when it comes to these kinds of events.
And then I feel like my things are like, so what do I do about this? I feel like there's also like, I mean, it's both like in some ways like I want to make sure that I can like live happily and survive and whatnot. And there's also, I think, a little bit of like, I mean, it's one of those things where it's none of our responsibility to teach. It's like we can't convert everybody, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also, it's like, well then, where does I think if it's for one of those things where we're just like, okay, yeah, it's not everyone's responsibility to teach everybody everything, but some of us feel a calling. Some of us feel a desire to engage in those ways with people who perhaps are our family or our friends or whatever. But something I found recently, or just even since I've come out, I'm just like, for whatever reason, my family can't or doesn't hear it from me. They can't or don't want to, and so I end up like exhausting myself. So I gave up a long time ago. I'm just like, they don't want to hear it. And so I'm just like, you got to talk to your family. I'm just like, and do what? And because it's like, if this conversation is not going to result in queer people staying alive and black people staying alive and indigenous people getting their land back, in yada, 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 I don't want to waste my time anymore. And that's what, like, I hate looking at people who live in that world, you know, of separate from my reality, but it's just like, I don't have time to pull you back into the truth. Because, like, in the meantime, like, you're still, like, your buddies are still organizing against me. And I throw my hands and I'm like, well, like, the best thing I know to do is just get my people together. Get my people gathered. Get our people as safe as possible. And then, like, go back to, like, didn't you just say that you wanted to leave the country earlier? And I'm like, yeah, well, I contain multitudes.
Well, but I think that's, I don't know. I don't see that as contradictory. What I see that is like two impulses that you mentioned earlier, which are both really important. One is I'd like to survive and I'd like to be safe. So I may need to leave the country. And like, I think that just makes total sense that, you know, people are thinking that. On the other hand, I think there's the other impulse that's like, how do I change this? How do I contribute? How do I help? And I think there's like two levels there, right? One is this very personal, familial level where so many of us feel like years and years and years of just beating your head against a door, getting nowhere. And so my advice, you know, to anyone who listens to our show is just like, look, if there are moments of vulnerability, if there are moments of openness, of a willingness to listen, take those moments, right? And see if there's a moment of wanting to open the space up that usually is closed down. And if there is, take it. If not, again, you have to go back to, I think, what you said, Kevin, about like, I need to survive, I need to be safe, and I only have so much time, so I'm going to organize, I'm going to teach, I'm going to do something. And I guess what I always tell folks on our show, too, is like, it is 6 years of crisis. It's like 75 crises rolled into a nice, you know, bundle. It's a bundle package. If you sign up for Hulu, you get Showtime for free, right? Like, there's like 75 crises rolled into one. You can't contribute to fixing every one of those. So what is your thing? What is the time you have, and what is the thing you're going to do? What can you help with? And then what are you going to trust that others will do? And how can you support those others with whatever ways you can support them? But if we try, like, I guess I'm just speaking for me, if I try to tackle every crisis by some sort of form of organizing, teaching, contributing, activism, I'm not going to survive. I'm not going to be safe. I'm not going to be somebody who can contribute anything, and then that doesn't help me or anyone else, right? I think that's
something I am coming back to a lot, is like when I finally let my dysregulated brain slow down, and okay, Tip, I love you, but we have to stop now. Go to your place. Thank you. She is the sweetest little BB, and she's also the reason I'm never having children. Because, like, she's hard enough. She is hard enough.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I have leaned so heavily into my spiritual practices, not just as a manner of, like, survival, but just as, like, it is a more peaceful way of existing here. And I'm finding that I need to, like, lean deeper into my practices. The more that crises seem to come up, the more that themes seem to get harder, I believe that there is a call for, not a call for us, but there's an opportunity to, like, say, okay, like, how am, like, if I'm here now, like, and that's the thing, just like, you don't need to worry, like, I have to remind myself of this. Don't worry about how you're going to take care of yourself a year from now. Like, what are you going to, like, if right now, you're not okay. Right now, in this moment, you're not okay. What are you going to do right now to make yourself feel better, to bring yourself into equilibrium so that you can have a fucking coherent thought? Like, your emotions are wonderful. It's good data. You need to respond to it, but you also need to get to a space where, like, you can think clearly. Because if you do need to leave, you should do that with a clear head. If you do want to stay, you should do that with a clear head. Mm-hmm. But, like, don't do anything based off of. I mean, I'm saying this to myself. Don't do anything based off of your fears as much as possible. Is like acknowledge them as the facts that they are, and then make a decision. But don't do it because. And I'll speak for myself again. I can't operate that way, and it is just more helpful to me to like, what is my one thing I do? I teach people how to breathe. You know, I try to keep myself centered, and then hopefully by my peace expanding outward, it allows other people to find some shelter.
I love what you said too. Like what you just said there really hit me. Of like, don't worry about being okay a year from now. Mm-hmm. Worry about being okay right now. And that just seems so like it's so easy to forget that, isn't it? Like, isn't it just so easy to be like, you know, I think there's this impulse of like, I want to be safe for the rest of my life. I want to be at peace for the rest of my. I want to like live some. I was telling a friend this. Like, you watch a commercial of some retirement like agents, like retirement planning group, and they're like, by the time you're this age, you could have this much money and like own a vineyard and have like 3 golden retrievers and live by a lake and drink your coffee and smugly look out the window every morning, and like, what a wonderful existence I've led, right? And I think the like ruse there is like, hey, the goal is to have a peaceful and safe and happy life forever, and so that's your aspiration. Whereas I think in many ways, as you just said, we lose sight of like, hey, I need to be okay today. What is my practice for today? What is my strategy for today to regulate, to return back to my body, and to get to a place where I can breathe and then focus on surviving and contributing. And it doesn't have to be a 10-year situation. It needs to just be like what's in front of me right now.
I think that's also like where I think like organizing work and like getting involved with political stuff, like that's how I engage. Is like, okay, what's the next action? I was like, I want to make sure that people are booked. So right now, like, it's text banking. That's what I know how to do right now. That's what I know is necessary right now, because we turned Georgia blue. There's an opportunity for us to continue that in that direction. And so it's just, and I think that's also, I think, too oftentimes, and this is maybe just this is a side comment. That's how I would, if I were a politician, that is also how I would organize my politics. Is not, what are we going to do 5 years from now? What are we going to do to ensure the economy in 10 years? What are we going to do to shore up that we don't, hit the threshold? I'm like, we're going to hit the threshold already. It's like, what are we going to do right now? What can we do right now? And that, I think, what's the problem in our city right now? We've got too many homeless people. Like we have, I remember rephrase that. We have too many people who are without housing due to the city like not providing the things that they need, even though like there's so much. We also have a housing crisis here because like private equity firms are buying up houses and disallowing people from buying houses that are like in the middle range. It's just, these are the things I know to do. These are the things I know that I can focus on to say, okay, this is what's going to make a difference in my world today or in the near future. And if I've got the dreams. I've got the things I want to do. They're not here yet. What's right here? And that for me, like, it's very AA. It's very one day at a time. Very 12-step.
But it's like doing is the answer. Like, so like there's such a mode we can get in, right? I'm just going to doom scroll. I'm going to be totally deflated and dysregulated by all the crises. But what's the answer? The answer is to do something. And again, that's when I come back to, like, if you try to do everything, you'll do nothing. But if you, like, I love what you said. You're like, this is what I know how to do. And so that's always my encouragement to anyone who listens to my show. I'm just like, find a thing you know how to do and do it, right? And then pay attention to everything else and support folks who are doing things you're not doing because you're doing your thing. And together we move forward. Together we do our best. And as you said, it's not about fixing the world forever. It's about fixing things right in front of us that we see in our communities.
Something
in our
you were touching on earlier
that
that I want to pull that thread a little bit too is that, like, we're so afraid of suffering. Like, we are so afraid of the pain that comes with acknowledging reality or, like, the things that we need to do, that we would rather get stuck in the details than go after a solution and fail and feel more suffering. And I think that there are moments, I'll even admit myself, that I will become convinced all is lost. And that's fine if I need to stay there for a while, but the truth, like, the question for me is, like, what do I want to feel now? What would I like to feel next? And also just, like, is it true? Is it going to last forever? Do I know that for a fact? The answer is no. I haven't lived enough to know. But if I sit here on my ass, you know, just doom scrolling again, I know for certain that my feeling is going to stay the same. And I don't want that. And that's literally, like, where I even move from. Like, it sounds very, very selfish to care about how I feel first. But I think actually that's the answer. You have to care about how you feel first in order for you to gauge in anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because if you don't interrogate how you're feeling, how do you ever realize, hey, what I'm doing here, doom scrolling endlessly, getting super, super, super full of despair. If you don't interrogate how you're feeling, how do you ever recognize that those patterns and those habits aren't going to help you? And by extension, they're not going to help anyone else.
And then you feel bad about the fact that you can't do anything
despair,
because
right?
you got to break your own cycles. You know?
But it's not selfish to become in tune with what you're feeling, because that's the only way you can become somebody who helps anyone beyond yourself. If
my dog is currently tearing up her toy, and she's like, "I'm going to make all the noise now because it's my time."
Okay.
And now we're coming up on time, and I always try to end my show asking 5 questions of everybody. So this is not exactly lightning round, but it's just 5 cues. You ready, Dr. Brad Onishi?
Yep.
You ready? What's one thing you like about yourself?
Yes, let's do it. Just the kind of ruthless pursuit of what I think is the right thing to do, which oftentimes in the past has kind of been a weakness. But, resigned from my job recently, wrote a big resignation letter, and, a lot of people are like, it's kind of risky. You're going to burn some bridges. And I'm like, well, people need to know what happened at this place. So here you go, world, take it. And so
you just pulled a Beyonce. You said,
I
just fell in love. I just quit my job. He said, just like heard Moda, like, heard the new album Renaissance one time, and it's just like, yep, I'm out. I'm digging a new foundation. Yeah, that's you. You actually wrote that.
Wrote
song.
the letter. Yeah, no.
So that you won't break my soul. Anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, the royalties
sure.
are really changing my life at the moment. That's good. Yeah.
And then you can move to Amsterdam, just like you planned. This is not one of the questions.
Yes.
What's your sign? What's your zodiac? That makes sense to me. Do you know your big 3?
Okay.
It's okay. I wanna do a series where I read all my friends' charts and then just like tell them about their shit. But I love a Capricorn. My eldest brother's a Capricorn, and like I just vibe well. The pragmatism is just lovely. Second question. What's one thing you're super proud of?
I'm proud of Straight White American Jesus, our show, because we're not fancy. We're not like, if you listen to us, we're kind of just pretty boring professor dudes who are not good at, being being I don't know what social media people or something, and I'm just proud that like we've been able to help people. Like that's all. People are like, why do you do this work? It must be exhausting. It's like it is, but like if we can help folks like figure out what they went through in their religious community or what's happening politically in our country, then that's what I care about. And I'm proud. Like you get a lot of emails, a lot of white supremacists not happy with us and stuff like that, but you also get emails from folks that are like, you helped me so much, or I never thought about it this way, and now I get it.
Brilliant.
Or,
what
blah,
is
blah, blah.
one
So
thing
I'm proud of that
really pisses you off, or is just like a pet peeve?
This is just going to sound like a really small thing, but it actually leads to bigger things. If I am waiting in line for anything, I turn into that person who makes sure that no one else like cuts in line or like somehow gets ahead when they shouldn't be. Like my partner will tell you, like the amount of times at the movies where like we're all waiting to get into like a big movie and like someone somehow like jumps ahead and I'm like the person yelling like, "Hey, you just cut in line," like making a big scene. And I've always been that way, and it's like super embarrassing. And it's like I have to tell myself like when I'm in a line, like calm down. You're okay. No one's cutting. And to me, I think that what that speaks to is like my pet peeve is like unfairness. Like if somebody right like gets something they don't deserve or is doing something in a way that jumps ahead of others in the group, and then I just like all of my alarms.
This is not fair.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, it's just I cannot breathe. I can't think. It's just like you got here after the person be right there. You should be waiting.
Why are you? Why do you believe that your time is more valuable
than mine? Why are you trying to like destroy the group? You're not better than
social
anyone.
Contract
like,
here,
let's all just
and you're just
recognize
fucking it up
together. Like,
are you an Enneagram 8?
I have never taken the Enneagram. Somebody asked me,
you're going to get kicked out of progressive Christianity.
No, I know. Well, they looked at me like I was a voyager from like I had been living in a place where there was no internet or contact with the outside world for a long time and had just shown up back up into society. So I am sorry to everyone listening.
I don't
I'm sorry.
really care.
I've disappointed you right now.
I'm a personal fan of like there's a thing called a theory called the brain-based Enneagram or the whole Enneagram, where the theory is you are actually all 9 types at once working in different capacities, and so this can show you how you function in health and also just like what costs you a lot of energy. And so for me, my emotions, exhausting. Like I'm talking, and that's also why I have to take care of myself a lot because there's a lot going on. Anyways, that's not the questions either. The fourth question is actually, what's one thing that you are really committed to?
Just committed to, you talked about a calling earlier about teaching, and I'm committed to that. I feel like I've been a teacher for going on over 20 years now, and every time I veer away from it, and I'm like, I'm going to get a new job and make like more money, or I'm going to do this thing and be, not teaching and not trying to convince people or help people understand things, whatever. Doesn't matter what I do. I come right back to somehow teaching, somehow trying to do things that just open up people's worlds and help them see things in a different way. And it's not always, successful. It's not always very grandiose, but I feel like that's what I'll do till I die, right? It's just like I'm committed to like learning and then helping others learn. And that sounds kind of, drab, but yeah. I don't know. I mean, like there's, I live out here in the Bay Area. There's so many people like in Silicon Valley and startup culture, and they're and there's like these things all around you that are like, hey, do this and you'll get rich, and every time I like even dip my toe into that, I'm like, dude, you're like 40. If you were gonna be like making money and doing this stuff, you would have done it already. Because every time you try it, after like 2 months, you're like, my soul is like dying, and I need to go back to doing.
Deadass. Anytime I've ever tried to make money, I've lost money, and any time I just try to help people, I make a lot of money. And it's like it's the wildest thing. I'm just like, so that's why I'm big on sliding scales. I'm big on reduced pricing. I'm big on scholarships because I'm just like, I'm not saying that the universe is providing for me, but I'm just saying that. Last question. What's one thing? Here's the thing about me being a woo-woo person is like I hate the fact that I am such a mystic sometimes, or such like a weird person, because I'm just like I fully believe everything I'm saying. And I just don't want people to think that like I'm not like a critical person, or that I'm like my feet are firmly on the ground. It's just that my inner world is just huge. Anyways, what's one thing you want to do before you die? That's the last question.
I love it. I love it. Oh wow! I
just
don't
one
know.
thing. Doesn't have to be big.
Ooh, that's such a hard question.
Just something maybe you haven't done before.
So, I grew up surfing. Surfing's like one of the things that I do, like in terms of self-care and like not being in the doom scrolling mode. Like that is the thing for me. And I'm not like like I said, middle aged at this point.
Fun.
There's no getting better at surfing. It's just a matter of like enjoying it. And when I was 18, my two friends and I, who I surfed with all the time, we saved all our money, and our graduation trip from high school was supposed to be to go to Costa Rica for a week and surf and have a great time. And one of the church moms, as they always do, ruined everything and convinced everybody that going to Costa Rica was like the most dangerous thing in the world, and we would be, that
you would be up to the worst, that you get somebody pregnant,
and so all of this got
and
shut.
You would all die.
We would all end up in a Marxist commune.
If only.
Right, raising all of... I know. And so, never did it. And so, you know what? I've kind of looked at myself and I'm like, all right, pal, you turn 40. Before you're 50, you need to take that trip to Costa Rica with a friend and go for it. So I'm going to do that before I die. I'm saying it on this podcast right now. The world is listening.
Listen, that's part
and now
of
I have
like
to,
how
now I have to do
one
it.
Of my
yeah,
friends
here we
was
go.
Just like, I'm going to bike from Seattle to the lowest point in South America, and he did it. And he told everybody before he quit his job that he was going to do it a year before, so that he would start doing it. And then it was coming closer. Didn't practice riding a bike. Just got all the gear, and then kind of learned as he went. And I'm just like, I kind of love that. And it also, great book. It's by Jedediah Jenkins. It's called To Shake the Sleeping Self. So if that's, he was also on the pod. So if you want to go like back in the archives and listen, he's in there. Anyways, Brad Onishi, I've had such a good time hanging out with you and getting to know you. And I just love being in your presence. And I hope that we get to do it more, hopefully.
I feel the same thing. I mean, just thanks for inviting me.
I don't think it's a bummer. I think it's
kind of
informative.
So appreciate you having me on. And
shows me what I do not want, so I know what I do want. You know what I'm saying? In the world, not as far as conversation or content. Tippy's like, are you... Kevin, you just shaded the shit out of him. How dare you?
I was going to make a joke about how, like, when I was single and I would date people, they'd be like, "Oh, thank you for showing me what I don't want."
Also, kind of funny, but also like
that's on my expense.
That's dating for you. That's also that is why people break up with us.
I know.
And that's it. Anyways, where can people find you on the internet? Where can people find your work, your book, the pod, etc.?
Yeah, so I'm at Bradley Onishi on Twitter. Straight White American Jesus is the show. I know that sometimes people find the show and they're like, what is this? Fox News, Newsmax, MAGA propaganda. And I actually get emails from Fox News and the Daily Caller all the time wanting to advertise on the show because they think
you
that's
should say, hey, this episode is brought to you by Fox News. I'm reading a script and I'm taking their money. And here it is.
Yep. Some people have said to do that.
Having a moral conscience is pretty cool, too, you know?
Yeah, haven't taken them up on it.
You're not a capitalist, though, so...
and so, yeah, find the show. And book is called Preparing for War. And you can pre-order it now, and would love to have your support there. And lots of personal stories. Tell the story of my first kiss with my ex-wife, which is, juicy tidbit there. And, Bible studies about Revelation and See You at the
I
Pole.
thought I put that
and
out
all
of my
kinds
mind.
of
Forgot about
ridiculous
See You
things.
at the Pole.
Anyway.
Yeah. I thought
You're
about
welcome.
Someone like
You're welcome.
I was talking with one of my friends who does queer youth ministry online, and I'm just like, is there a way to queer See You at the Pole where we raise like a pride flag during Pride Month, like, and then just like we pray for against the violence in the queer community? Like, I feel like that should be a thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
LGBTQ at the pole or
LGBTCU at the
something?
pole.
Or,
She's
I
like,
don't
what's the
know.
C? The C stand for? It says it stands for charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent.
Yeah.
Bitch. I'm ready. All right, it's on the pod. Whoever
We
wants to
just
hit us up,
created a thing.
let us know.
Okay, we did
I'm
it.
gonna hit
All
start
right.
now.